Thanks, Sophie. You're watching South East Today. Our top story tonight. As winter starts to bite, homeless and addiction charities say council cuts will be disastrous for thousands of people in Sussex.
To see it go would be devastating for the community, 100%. Without a doubt, some of these people in here may die.
We're in Hastings tonight with the latest. There's been a worrying rise in cases of the C. difficile virus, which killed 90 people in Kent Hospital 17 years ago. Bearing up well, how the cub, which had pioneering brain surgery, is making a good recovery at his home near Canterbury.
Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna run around and desert you.
And we chat to comeback king Rick Astley about giving up his music career and enjoying his return to the stage in Brighton. Welcome to the programme. I'm Natalie Graham. Charities are warning tonight that proposed funding cuts could be devastating for the most vulnerable people in East Sussex. Staff at the Seaview project say they'll be forced to end some services for adults with drug and alcohol addiction. And the floating support service, which helped thousands of people avoid homelessness last year, says it's set to lose almost 90% of its funding. East Sussex County Council says it has to make tough decisions to avoid a £55 million black hole in its finances. Our political editor Charlotte Wright has the details.
A hot lunch and a lifeline. The Seaview project in Hastings provides food, clothing, support and services for vulnerable adults in the community, including those battling with alcohol and drug addiction.
Without Seaview, I would have relapsed. Relapse for me was terrifying. It meant the ends, final ends of my journey for addiction. No more. No more.
I'd be lost without, I wouldn't know what to do without Seaview. It's just like a second family here.
I genuinely believe that it saved my life. The Seaview project, if it wasn't here, where would I have gone to instead of coming here? You know, a lot of my using was in British Home stores, toilets, McDonald's toilets.
But East Sussex County Council is consulting on removing funds that pay for some of the drug and alcohol recovery services that Seaview offer.
I'm very concerned about it. It's not sort of reductions in services, but completely cutting them, so they won't exist any longer if the proposals are approved.
In a bid to balance the books next year, the council is also looking at cutting funding to tackle homelessness. The charity Brighton Housing Trust says its floating support service, which helps people at risk of homelessness across Sussex, would lose £4 million a year under the proposals, a cut of 88%.
We work with some of the most vulnerable people in society. The cost of living crisis continues. We've got record people living in temporary accommodation across the county. And homeless prevention services like ours are actually needed more than ever.
But the council says it's having to make tough decisions to fill a black hole of £55 million next year.
The cost of adult social care placements have gone up by 40%. Our grant has gone up by 28%. There is a massive gap that we can't keep funding from reserves. We were told last year to take it out of reserves, which we did. But you can only spend those reserves once, and then unless you replenish them, you will very soon run out of money.
Back at the Seaview project, though, there are fears that closing some of its addiction services could have severe consequences.
To see it go would be devastating for the community, 100%. Without a doubt, some of these people in here may die.
A public consultation into the proposed savings ends on the 28th of November.
Charlotte joins us now from Hastings. And Charlotte, East Sussex County Council is actually calling for more funding from the government.
Yes, and they're not the only ones. Just last night, councillors in Medway met to discuss what they think is going to be an £11 million overspend on their budget. The government says that it is giving councils across the country an additional £1.3 billion of funding, but we'll find out next month exactly how much these councillors have to play with for the next financial year. The argument from charities like the Seaview project here is that it would be a false economy to cut their funding. They say, you know, these services that they provide, if they were taken away, then that'll just put more pressure on the statutory services, the services the councils have to legally provide. It's going to be hard to see how councils balance their budgets, especially as we're not expecting a huge injection of cash from the government, but they'll be setting their final budgets for the next financial year in February.
Charlotte in Hastings, thank you. A former Cub Scout leader has been found guilty of a string of sexual offences against children as young as 7 over a period of almost 3 decades. 60-year-old Ian Sylvester from Port Slade also worked as a diving instructor, a first aid trainer and a babysitter, abusing his position of trust to befriend his victims and their families. He'll be sentenced in February. Firefighters in West Sussex are battling a fire that spread to 3 houses in Sussex near Burgess Hill. 6 fire engines have been sent to the blaze in Brighton Road and a section of the road has been closed. There are no reports of any injuries, but a dog has been rescued. Nearby residents are being advised to keep their doors and windows closed. NHS managers across the South East say they're worried about a rise in cases of the bacterial infection Clostridium difficile. C. diff infections can cause severe diarrhoea and led to 90 deaths at the Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells NHS Trust in 2007 following failures in hospital hygiene. We can get more from our health correspondent Mark, who's here with us now. People will be worried about this. How big a problem is it at the moment?
Yeah, of course they will be. Let's take a look at a few numbers, shall we? Between April and June this year, there was a near 18% increase in the number of C. diff cases compared to last year, and it's been rising since the pandemic. It's important to point out that many of those were cases in the community, but in hospitals there was a 6% rise in cases where patients were tested for C. diff who may well have caught the infection in hospital. Those are the highest figures since September 2011. However, those numbers are still considerably lower than they were back in 2007 when the statistics were first recorded. Experts say the rise in numbers is partly due to better testing and reporting, partly due to antibiotic resistance, and we may have been concentrating on other viruses.
We've really concentrated on COVID and respiratory infections, flu. Your viewers might have heard of respiratory syncytial virus. That's one thing that's come up a lot recently, and other respiratory viruses. And perhaps we haven't been quite concentrating quite as much as we should have done on diarrheal diseases such as C. diff and also norovirus.
And Dr. Pitt actually reminded me that hand gel doesn't kill C. diff. You need soap and water to do that. Well, where does all this leave our hospitals? Well, hospitals in Sussex, Maidstone and East Kent have all seen more than 100 cases each so far this year. Medway and East Surrey are around half that, while Darren Valley Hospital has only had around 20 cases. C. diff is a priority for all our hospital trusts, and the UK Health Security Agency told me outbreaks of these infections can be managed through robust infection prevention and control processes. And that's important because everyone in the NHS will remember the awful situation at Maidstone nearly 20 years ago when 90 people died, and the NHS will be determined not to have a repeat of that, Natalie.
It will. Mark, thank you. A former sports trainer from Hawley in Surrey has been jailed for 4 years after pleading guilty to the supply of cocaine and money laundering. Callum Stewart was stopped by officers as he drove through East Grinstead, and subsequent searches found £43,000 in cash, cocaine worth an estimated £100,000 and weapons including a knife and a knuckle duster. A man's been arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence of drugs after a car entered the River Ada in Shoreham. The vehicle was recovered from the water in the early hours of this morning, and the 44-year-old from Henfield in West Sussex was taken into custody. A rare and protected fungus has been found at a nature reserve in Canterbury. Known as lion's mane fungus, it has the highest level of legal protection in the country. So anyone who uproots or damages it could face a £5,000 fine. Now, for almost 3 years, firefighters in Kent have been sending aid to their counterparts in war-torn Ukraine who've been directly targeted by Russian attacks. There have now been 1,000 days of war since Russia launched its full-scale invasion. And in that time, almost 400 Ukrainian fire stations have been destroyed and 99 firefighters have lost their lives. Now the charity Fire Aid is asking for more help so it can continue to send fire engines, ladders and breathing kits to Ukraine. Claire Starr has the details.
Firefighting on the front line as the war in Ukraine rages on. But coming to the rescue in a conflict carries its own risk.
After secondary shelling, not only this truck was destroyed, but also three our firefighters been killed. And of course, it's very hard to describe these feelings.
The challenges facing fire crews in Ukraine has been documented by filmmaker Edward Matthews, working with British charity Fire Aid. This, the aftermath of the bombing of a children's hospital in Kyiv.
The scenes of devastation were absolutely horrific. There was children with cancer, covered in blood, and there was a massive response from the community, firefighters, police officers, everyone just coming together to help clear rubble.
Fire Aid has been sending protective equipment and trucks from the UK to help, coordinated from this fire station in Ashford. Oksana left Ukraine 2 months after Russia's invasion. She works to ensure resources get where they need to.
They have to deal with a much more grief, repetitive shellings of missiles, drones on a daily basis. We have never stopped working even for a day, because it's always about finding additional funding, it's about matching the needs, it's about finding equipment.
Travelling in convoy down to Dover and across Europe, 118 decommissioned fire appliances have so far been sent to the war zone. After 7 convoys of aid, the charity is aiming for an 8th early in 2025.
We started off really small with an idea back when the full-scale invasion started, and it multiplied really quickly with all the fire and rescue services from around the UK all wanting to get involved, the firefighters wanting to get involved with volunteering to go on these convoys.
The Ukrainian fire service has largely been forgotten about, so just telling their stories is really important because they're some of the most inspirational people that I've ever met.
For me, it's a sign of hope. It's all about continued international support of Ukraine.
Our emergency service supporting rescuers during conflict as the war in Ukraine reaches a grim milestone. Claire Starr, BBC South East Today, Ashford.
It's exactly 7:15. This is our top story tonight. Charities are warning tonight that proposed funding cuts could be devastating for the most vulnerable people in East Sussex, including homeless families and adults with drug and alcohol addiction. East Sussex County Council says it has to make tough decisions to avoid a £55 million black hole in its finances. Also in tonight's programme. I get together with Rick Astley for a chat about his incredible career and his big Christmas gig in Brighton.
And we've got a couple more days of the very cold weather before it's all changed for the weekend. Milder with some rain and some very strong winds. I've got the details later in the programme.
And if you have a story for us, then we would love to hear from you. You can email southeasttoday@bbc.co.uk, or you can get in touch via WhatsApp. You can either use the number on the screen or scan the QR code. Care home residents are being treated to a musical masterpiece performed by the Glyndebourne Opera Company and inspired by Dame Vera Lynn in Sussex, the county she loved so dearly. Their new show celebrates the Forces Sweethearts' hugely popular World War II radio broadcasts. Hannah Rowe has been to a performance today near Ditchling, where, of course, Dame Vera lived from the 1960s until her death 4 years ago.
Whether you're old or young, whoever performs it, and whatever language it's sung in, there's nothing quite like music for bringing people together. And these musicians are the best in the business. They've moved from the grand opera halls of Glyndebourne to this, a much smaller crowd, but they say just as special.
What's amazing about music is coming into care homes and just seeing that instant connection. Somehow we don't understand really what's going on in the human brain, incredibly complicated, but music seems to cut through like lightning.
Welcome, it's me, Vera. Thank you for being here today for Sincerely Yours.
The performance takes the shape of a live radio show, with the lead singer taking on the role of its legendary host.
We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when.
For Dame Vera Lynn's daughter, there is no better tribute.
We've had a very long association with here, and she's always lived in Ditchling, and I think all the songs always had a meaning. They always had to have meaning. She always chose her own songs because they had to have a meaning. Not only resonated with her, but she knew would resonate with the people who would be listening.
I just tried to sort of emulate her, if perhaps successfully, but I think I did a good job and everybody seems to enjoy it, so that's the main thing. It's very fulfilling to start with, just because you know that your presence there is greatly appreciated. They absolutely love it, and even though it might not read as like they're enjoying it, you just know, you can tell they're sort of tapping away with their foot or their hand, or they're just sort of smiling and not like with their eyes closed. It's just so fulfilling, it's lovely.
These care home performances have been a great success so far. Will they continue? It looks like they will. Hannah Rowe, BBC South East Today, near Burgess Hill.
Now to a bear with a very sore head. 6 weeks ago, Bocky had life-saving brain surgery, but he's made a remarkable recovery. In fact, he's almost back to his normal self, according to his keepers at Kent's Wildwood Trust. Now, the cub had been suffering from seizures, and he became only the second bear in the world to undergo a pioneering operation. Jadzia Samuel has been checking on his progress.
This 2-year-old brown bear is known here as a medical miracle. While he is now a happy and healthy cub, Bocky is only 6 weeks out of a major brain operation, the second of its kind ever performed on a bear.
Back in April, Bocky actually suffered a seizure. So obviously we brought him straight back inside into his shut-off. We called the vet, we came in and he did some tests. While we were trying to figure out what happened, he actually suffered from another seizure. So that's when we realised that something more serious was going on. We had a look round, we did loads of tests, and it was actually decided the best thing for him would be to get an MRI scan of his head. And it turns out that he actually has something called hydrocephalus, which is fluid that sits on his brain.
For a while, Bocky was taking 15 pills a day to manage his symptoms, but eventually his medical team realised surgery would be the only way to save him.
The procedure itself involved the placing of a shunt that runs from the brain down internally into his abdomen. So when there's a build-up of pressure on the brain, the fluid through that pressure is driven through the tube, which then runs down internally through Bocky and then drains into his abdomen. And because quite simply it's his own fluid, it's just resorbed.
The one thing that we were worried about with Bocky is that his condition is quite complicated, and just the fact that he has this water accumulated in the brain, this dilated space in the brain, and that we could drain it, we never knew if that was the underlying cause of the problems he was having or was more a symptom. So it was a real risk, and we were all aware of this.
However, now, apart from a slightly funky haircut, he's back to his playful self.
Since the operation, his recovery has been, I think, remarkable is probably the fairest way to say it. He's active, he's got progressively better each day, and he's becoming the bear that we've all known and loved for a long time. And he's back to normal, to the casual eye.
Since his surgery, Bocky has gained 20 kilograms in just 6 weeks, which means he now weighs 147 kilograms. But when he's fully grown, he may double in size, meaning he could weigh up to 400 kilos. One of the main signs of recovery is that Bocky seems to be preparing for torpor, a state of semi-hibernation over winter. And during this winter downtime, he's set to turn 3, marking his official entry into bear adulthood. Hopefully another clause for celebration come spring. Jadzia Samuel, BBC South East Today, Wildwood.
Now to someone else with a funky haircut. He's famously the man who's never going to give you up, let you down, run around or desert you. And that catchy chorus in his debut single made Rick Astley a pop star in 1987 when he was 21. Nearly 40 years and 40 million album sales later, Rick is enjoying a renaissance thanks in part to his gig at Glastonbury last year. He's recently published his autobiography and he's got a Christmas gig at the Brighton Centre next month. We chatted earlier, but before that, let's see Rick in action.
We're no strangers to love.
I'm working with perhaps the top producers in the country at the moment, Stock Aitken Waterman, and it's been really great up to now.
Rick, it's lovely to see you. And I know your book covers a lot of the interesting stuff that's happened to you in your life, but it basically divides into 3 phases, doesn't it? And I wondered if we could start with a middle one, because you retired at 27.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely crazy when you say it like that, retired at 27. Yeah, but effectively that's kind of what I did. Yeah, I'd had an amazing 4 or 5 years, a very intense 4 or 5 years, and we'd become parents, and it just seemed like the right thing to do at the time. But now that talking about it now being 58, that just sounds absolutely bonkers, but that's kind of what I did, yeah.
And it did all work out well. It turned out to be a very smart decision, I guess, in some ways. So when you look at other people going through the industry, especially young people, you know, would you recommend taking a break?
Yeah, possibly, but I wasn't really taking a break. I was kind of done, and I kind of felt that I wouldn't get a chance again, if you know what I mean. So I think it wasn't really a break. I think it was an end for me. And then 1 or 2 things just started to happen that just brought me back into it. And I've never really looked back. I think I've always loved doing the gigs, and I've always been in love with music. I just got sick of the business side of it. So when I kind of gradually started coming back into it and doing a lot of gigs like, you know, nostalgia and retro gigs with lots of other artists from my period and what have you, I just kind of loved it. It felt comfortable, to be honest. So I don't know whether I'd advise anybody else to do it, because I think we're all individuals and it needs to suit you. But it definitely worked for me, for sure, yeah.
And then there was Glastonbury, of course.
Yeah, well, obviously that's been probably the pinnacle of the last few years, I think, in terms of gigging. I get to do festivals these days, which is a bit crazy. I think they invite me as Uncle Rick, but I just love it. And obviously Glastonbury was a great summer that summer anyway, I think, for gigs, and that was just absolutely amazing. The whole weekend I got to do a set with Blossoms as well, where we did Smith songs, which was a completely different departure and completely mad. But yeah, I've been super lucky, I think, as well. And I think I do realise that, and I don't ever forget that. And I think that's part of the kind of joy of the position that I'm in, is that I can relate to how lucky I am, you know what I mean? So
it really comes across, Rick, as well. And I know you've got a gig in Brighton at the Brighton Centre next month.
Yeah.
That's going to be a good one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that is something totally different. One of the things I've loved over the last few years is jumping in and doing completely different things, like singing Smith songs with Blossoms, or doing this series of gigs we're going to do in December, which is doing a few Christmas songs, but doing a swing gig, basically, because I like throwing myself into something completely different. And as much as I love singing Never Gonna Give You Up and all those old songs, I have done it quite a few times. So it's nice to kind of jump on a stage and do something completely different. So this run up to Christmas is about swing and Christmas. And we've got an amazing horn section, my band, and we're just going to have a great time. So yeah, it's a fun thing to do, yeah.
I wasn't going to mention your original hit. I'm very glad you did, Rick. It's lovely to chat. Thank you very much and have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
So Rick's feeling Christmassy, and Nina, so is the weather, isn't it? A little bit of white stuff around.
It's cold and it's been frosty this morning. We started off with the clear skies and we kept the sunshine through the afternoon. It was cold and it was windy, and it will stay that way for the next couple of days as well. A bit of a change then as we look to the weekend's forecast, but at least through Thursday and Friday, the cold air is with us, and for most of us, it's going to be dry and it's going to be bright. Tomorrow, we have just got to watch out for this low pressure system. It's moving through the channel and it may just bring a few showers, but behind that, pressure is then rising. It's this system which will bring the change once again into the weekend. So at first tonight, it's dry and it's clear, and we've got falling temperatures. Another frost with temperatures sitting at around about -3 degrees, but there is more cloud arriving by tomorrow morning, and so a little more overcast first thing. Now the cloud should gradually break up for most of us, and we'll see some brighter spells developing through the day. That low pressure system sitting in the channel just throws ahead of it a few showers, mainly along the coast of East Sussex. Most of these will be of rain, but across any higher ground there is always the possibility of a little bit of sleet or wet snow. But you can see away from those showers, it is dry and it's a brighter afternoon with temperatures at 4 to 5 degrees. The wind's not quite as strong through the day tomorrow as well. Any of those showers will then clear away overnight Thursday and in towards Friday. So it's a dry start to Friday morning. Some patchy cloud coming and going, but still falling temperatures. Another frosty start on Friday morning. And Friday will be dry with a bit of patchy cloud with some bright or some sunny spells. The winds will pick up a little as we head through the afternoon, and temperatures possibly a degree or so higher, but it's still another very chilly day. Now we saw that developing area of low pressure and it sweeps in through the weekend, pushing away all of that cold air. Things are going to be much milder, but along with that we've got some cloud, some pretty heavy rain, and more noticeably we'll have some strong winds as well, especially through the day on Sunday. We're looking at those winds maybe gusting up to around 50 miles an hour. So after a couple of very cold days to come over the next couple of days, where most places are going to be dry and bright, the weekend daytime temperatures back up into double figures, the return of some rain, and we'll just need to watch out for those strong winds and staying a little unsettled as we head through the early part of next week. Natalie.
Doesn't look good, does it, Nina? But thank you very much indeed. That is it from us for now. We will, of course, be back after the national news at 10. But until then, have a good evening, won't you? Bye-bye.